Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange and the host who might be a ghost. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all manner of strange and unusual literature that I have found in my travels. Today is a great day. It is Poetry Thursday. Some might say the most poetryist of all the Thursdays. But that some might just be me and the few people who I've told to call it that. Without further ado, I'd like to read you a poem about. It's more of a dark poem in tone than it is a specifically weird poem. But maybe the darkness of the tone addresses some of the weird of it. I am talking about Genetics by Sakutaro Hagiwara. A little background about Sakutaro Hagiwara. He was a Japanese poet. He lived from 1886 to I think 1942. He preferred to let the public think that he was a tortured poet, and he often wrote about existential terror or psychic terror. That might be in one's mind, or even rather than painting an intimate picture of the landscape or of his surroundings, he preferred to make it dark and grim and foreboding, which kind of set him apart from the other poets at the time. An interesting thing about Hagiwara was that he was set to inherit his father's hospital. He came from a family with a very wealthy background, but he decided to become a poet instead. A good choice, no matter what. You don't always have to follow the family path, except for maybe in Japan where that might matter, but don't quote me on that. So he became a poet, and he courted a little bit of the fame that came with that. However, he did die with rather financial trouble. He had, in his last years of life, he had to seek help from his family in order to make ends meet. So that's a little about him. I'm going to read his poem called Genetics, which I mentioned that it was that he had a theme of like sort of dark and foreboding. So try to see if you can capture that while I'm reading it. The houses lay flat on its stomach on the ground, slumbering like giant spiders in the desolate dark outdoors. All beasts cowered in terror, frightened by the succubus, and they barked a sad, pale blue bark. Noir, tawar, yawa. The blades of sorghum whipping in the wind. Listen. Hush. That barking at the other side of the road? That's a dog howling. Noir, tawar, yawa. Is the dog feeling sick, Mommy? No, he's feeling hungry, my child. From afar, in the shadow of the faint lighting from the skies, the dog observed his enemies. From the remotest reaches, old memory, genetic, instinctual memory. He felt the presence of our pitiful forebears. The dog's soul paled in fear, and he let out a long howl in the night's shadowy road. Noir, tawar, yawa. Is the dog feeling sick, Mommy? No, he's feeling hungry, child. So that's Genetics by Sakutaro Hagiwara. As you can see, it does have a bit of a dark tone to it. You can see that in the way he describes the surroundings that I think he's just sitting in right now at the time. In the desolate, dark outdoors, all beasts cowered in terror, frightened by the succubus. So that's he's describing a nighttime scene, and it doesn't look that great. It looks very, very, very spooky if you were to walk in on it. He says frightened by the succubus, and I actually had to read that a couple times in the multiple times that I read through, just because I wasn't sure what he was getting at, whether there's a succubus haunting the area, or something like he's trying to equate the dog to being a succubus. I think it's the dog is a succubus, and the dog eats anything it can find, and so all the other animals are scared of this particular animal. But he could be referring to something else in the scene. If you've caught what it is, be sure to write it in the comments below. I'd be glad to hear from you. I'll leave a link to the poem in the description so that you can find it and read it as well. It's a pretty interesting poem. I also like how he sort of gets to that existential point where he says, from the remotest reaches of old memory, genetic, instinctual memory, he felt the presence of our pitiful forebears. He's describing this to the dog. Like, he's describing this thought process to the dog. Like, somewhere deep within this dog's DNA, like, he can sense our ancestors, and he's not happy with them. Whether it's our ancestors or the dog's ancestors. It might just be the past in general. And that's what Hagiwara was noted for. He didn't espouse like positive memory towards the past. He said things like pitiful forebears. So that is also something interesting that I found here. And then finally, I'll say how he describes the pale blue bark. He describes it as noir, tawar, yawa. And I will make sure to put that right here so you can see it, because it's a weird way to describe a dog barking, or because it's not in line with how dogs bark in America, and it doesn't seem to be in line with how dogs bark in Japan. As far as I know, there's a specific sound, and it's not that. So it does seem like he's making this dog out to be some sort of monster, lonely monster, wandering this landscape in search of food and maybe more, because the child keeps asking, "Is the dog feeling sick, mommy?" And she says, "No, he's feeling hungry, hungry for food, hungry for companionship, hungry for a better past." I don't really know, and I like that it's open to interpretation there, and it really makes you think, because it comes up twice. Yeah. So that's Genetics by Sakutaro Hagiwara. I recommend you go out and read it. It's been quite a wonderful Poetry Thursday. I bid you farewell. Have fun in the weird nether region out there in the world.